The 1980s was a completely different television landscape than today. Premium cable was in its infancy, and few homes had those faux wood grain boxes that brought you Nickelodeon and HBO. Our family had cable very, very briefly in the early 1980s. I remember watching Thriller on MTV, Pinwheel on Nickelodeon, Summer Magic on the Disney Channel, and a cartoon called Transor Z on another random cable station. When my parents canceled cable, Transor Z went with it, and I learned for the first time that basic network television wasn't showing me all the cartoons being made. What I didn't know was that even your basic television stations were all playing different content in different parts of the country. 1980s television in America was made up of all kinds of independent stations all over the nation. In my hometown of Nashville, Channel 17 was where we went to watch most of our favorite after-school cartoons. Networks like ABC, NBC, and CBS would only play cartoons for a few hours on Saturday morning, and the rest played in syndication on weekday afternoons on independent television stations. So that meant the day I saw action figures at Circus World for a television show called Robotech, I was really confused. I'd never seen 1 second of a cartoon called Robotech, and I had no idea what channel it was on. I eventually assumed it was a cable show like Transor Z. To this day, I've never learned if Robotech aired in Nashville, Tennessee in 1985. What I did know just from looking at the packaging of the figures is that I'd probably love the show, despite eventually having a few of the toys and a complimentary Robotech button from a local video store. I never saw the show as a kid. When I finally watched it as an adult, it was as awesome as I'd always expected it to be.
This is not a toy.
Robotech is easily the most mature and complex animated series of the 1980s, and not just in terms of story content, but also in terms of the behind-the-scenes creation of the series itself. In the same fashion as Voltron, the Robotech saga is comprised of 3 different Japanese series: Super Dimension Fortress Macross, Super Dimension Cavalry Southern Cross, and Genesis Climber Mospeada. But unlike Voltron, where the Lion and Vehicle series are related in name only and never directly affect one another, Harmony Gold set about the difficult task of taking 3 unrelated series and carefully dubbing them into a multi-generational saga that follows the events of the first series, Super Dimension Fortress Macross. In Robotech's first cycle, known as the Macross Saga, an alien starship crashes on Earth at a place called Macross Island, and humanity comes together over many decades to restore the ship, called the SDF-1. An entire community, Macross City, is built up around the alien vessel. On the day of its maiden voyage, the SDF-1 automatically attacks an alien armada that has arrived in the solar system searching for it. The Earth finds itself invaded by an alien race known as the Zentradi. Caught up in the conflict is stunt pilot Rick Hunter and a young girl, Lynn Minmay. Rick flies into the airbase to see his friend and fighter pilot Roy Fokker.
You jealous? I had a late dinner with Commander Fokker.
Yes, I know they pronounce it Fokker in the series, but his name is a direct reference to the Dutch aircraft inventor Anthony Fokker, who developed biplanes for Germany in World War I, including the Fokker D-7, a model of which Roy gifts to Rick later in the series. Probably the Harmony Gold producers of Robotech didn't want the pronunciation of Fokker to be misunderstood as an English curse word, so they changed it, but the correct pronunciation is Fokker, especially considering Roy's background is Dutch-American. When the Zentradi attack, Rick is mistaken for a military pilot by SDF-1 bridge officer Lisa Hayes and ordered to scramble.
PF-102. You there on the exhibition grounds were on combat alert. Why haven't you taken off? You don't mean me, do you?
He quickly discovers that not only can his fighter plane transform into a giant mechabot, but that the Zentradi warriors are giants, which is why the military gave the Veritech fighters transforming capabilities after researching the interior of the SDF-1. They knew this day might come. When the crew makes the attempt to warp the SDF-1 away from Earth, they end up on the far side of Pluto, with most of Macross Island caught up in the transportation portal. They save around 70,000 human survivors and start the long journey back to Earth, hoping to reach it before the Zentradi can destroy them. In the process, the crew of the SDF-1 finds the Zentradi armada between them and home. A series of intense battles take place as they try to get back to their home planet. On the other side of the conflict, the Zentradi leader, Britai, and his loyal second, Exodor, attempt to unravel the mystery of the tiny humans of Earth, whom they refer to as Micronians.
What legend?
It presented a warning to the Zentradis to keep our hands off any Micronian planet.
The Zentradi are a race completely devoted to war and combat for countless generations. They have lost their history in the process, as well as the source of energy that created all of the genetic technology that made them giants. When Rick, Lisa, and pilot Ben Dickson are briefly captured by the Zentradi, they are forced to demonstrate human intimacy, and the Zentradi are both stunned and horrified. Horrified because Zentradi society is a world of gender segregation without emotions or intimacy, stunned because they realize that humans are their genetic ancestors, descended from their original protoculture. Now, this is where it gets a little confusing. In the original Japanese series, protoculture is the name given by the Zentradi to their creators, whom they fear and abhor because as a society dedicated to war and conquest, they are disgusted by intimacy, emotions, and the idea of recreational culture such as singing and dancing. The Zentradi arrive at Earth while on a mission to find and destroy all of the survivors of the Supervision Army, whom they rebelled against in the distant past. The SDF-1, simply named Macross in the original series, is a former Supervision Army battleship, hence the Zentradi's obsession with destroying it. Discovering remnants of their creators on Earth in the form of humans appears to be an unfortunate coincidence. In Robotech, protoculture is the name of an energy source that the Zentradi have long been searching the galaxy to reacquire, which is why they are searching for the SDF-1, because it contains the last protoculture factory in the universe. But the humans don't know that yet.
Standing by for bombardment, Commander Britai. Good. Level everything in the path of the assault forces, but be careful not to damage that battle fortress. I want to take it intact.
With only a few changes, Harmony Gold adhered closely to the original narrative of Super Dimension Fortress Macross. Rather than dumb the story down for very young children, the maturity of the series is left intact, as are the finer details. Well, most of the maturity.
Boy, is she beautiful.
For many kids in the 1980s, this was their first exposure to real Japanese anime, and why Robotech is regarded as one of the primary pioneer shows that sparked American interest in Japanese animation, an interest that would eventually explode in the 1990s. Robotech is a captivating series, in many ways being the first compelling English-language animated show that attracted adults as well as kids. It could have been primetime television if attitudes about animation had been different in 1985. The characters have real relationships that evolve and change. At the end of the series, Rick Hunter is not the hotshot pilot he was at the beginning, but a weathered war veteran. The villains are also somewhat three-dimensional, and as divisions of thought form between the different enemy leaders, the villains grow apart from one another as distinct characters. Robotech also handles Earth's leadership unconventionally as well. They are not heroic and benevolent. They resist the suggestions of the main characters, disregard their experiences, and betray the survivors of Macross Island by declaring them dead to the world. The government spends the majority of the series lying to the people of Earth. They don't want them to know the truth. It's one aspect of the series that has even more geopolitical relevance today than it did in 1985. The quality of the animation is mostly top-notch, minus a few filler episodes. The Japanese always have a talent for high-speed action in their animation, and Robotech doesn't disappoint. Intense space dogfights between Veritech fighters and battle pods abound. If you like action in your cartoons, you'll love this show. The series is filled with rich characters. The relationship between Roy Fokker and Claudia is real and credible. Zentradi ace pilot Miria's obsession with human fighter ace Max Sterling is not only fun to watch, but a pivotal turning point in the events of the series. The Three Stooges-style antics of the Zentradi spies are a treat as they attempt to understand human culture while staying off the radar and make for great comic relief. But it's not all a perfect picture. As much as I enjoyed Robotech, it has some problems. But to be fair, 99% of these issues are present in the original Japanese version as well. For starters, the series spends an inordinate amount of time focusing on Rick Hunter pining away for young singing starlet Lin Minmay, who for most of the series leads Rick on while proving to be a selfish, spoiled brat.
Oh, Rick, to think that I may never see you again.
Minmay!
Ah!
You're on!
Coming!
It makes you angry at both characters. You want Rick to man up and walk away, and you just want Minmay to disappear entirely, especially after she starts dating her pretentious, abusive cousin. At the same time Minmay is driving the story crazy, she'll also slowly make you, the viewer, go insane, because even though she's a famous singer, she only has one song, and she sings it over.
Stage lights flashing.
And over. And over.
Stage lights flashing, the feeling smashing.
And over.
Stage fright, go away. This is my big day.
And over again.
And I'm here now singing. All bells are ringing.
The song is called something like I Wanna Be a Star, and it sums up Minmay's shallow character, just a selfish teenage girl who wants to be famous.
Well, this is quite a turnout for you, Minmay.
Yes, I suppose these mobs are part of the price one must pay for fame.
At least in the original Japanese, she has a variety of songs that fit the mood of the scenes they're in. Having Minmay belt out this shallow pop song over and over and over, especially during a tragic scene, is just stupid. Another character I couldn't stand was Ben Dickson, an obnoxious subordinate pilot under Rick's command. I truly hated him, so I was glad he died midway into the series. I didn't shed any tears. He's just as obnoxious in the original Japanese series, so there's no reprieve in that version either. I should probably mention that. Characters actually die on this show. Permanently. The fact that Harmony Gold in the 1980s was brave enough to keep the deaths in the show and not cut them out or dub in stupid lines about them going to the hospital planet is something you have to salute. And they die in staggering numbers. Captain Gloval's terrible decisions get thousands of people killed. It's little wonder the Earth government wants him declared dead and gone. The guy is a war criminal against his own people. Gloval is a sociopathic wingnut who's depicted as a man of deep feelings, but his actions in the series run counter to these assertions. Consider that he activated an untested alien hyperdrive in Earth's atmosphere, and in doing so, transported an entire island along with the SDF-1 into deep space. All of those people are instantly dead. The SDF-1 only managed to take in 70,000 citizens of Macross City during the initial attack. We all know there were more on the ground, many more, and now they're cosmic popsicles orbiting Pluto. Even after the 70,000 people get on board, Gloval manages to kill scores of them again when he opts to transform the SDF-1 without actually knowing what will happen. And what happens is the ship transforms right on top of the 70,000 survivors, collapsing the salvage city on top of many of them. Well, the lucky ones anyway. Some were unlucky enough to be on the wrong side of surprise airlocks and were sucked out into space. Living under Captain Gloval's martial law as a citizen would be terrifying. It makes the status updates from the bridge crew after such incidents sound quite heartless.
Whatever damage that has occurred is regrettable. However, we fired the main gun and completely destroyed the enemy ship. Thank you for your cooperation.
My wife was just crushed by a skyscraper that was no longer on its foundation already, and my children were sucked into deep space. But thank God for Captain Gloval's inspired leadership. Even as the Earth government is telling Global to take the SDF-1 and get out of a city's airspace, he staunchly refuses and hovers right over a civilian population with the megafortress. When the Zentradi attack, does he move away to take the fight away from the city? Are you kidding? This is Captain Mad Jack Global. Hundreds of thousands of people in peril from an alien invasion? Time for Global to activate an experimental alien device for the first time at point-blank range to a civilian population for the third time. The SDF-1's mega shield overheats and turns the entire city below them into a Hiroshima-scale death crater. Every single inhabitant of the city is dead, all in the name of protecting the people of Earth. Good on you, Global. With protectors like you, who needs enemies? You also have to put yourself in a compromising mindset when watching Robotech. What I mean is you have a very compelling story about Earth's first contact with an alien race that has resulted in a widespread war and the possibility of discovering the true origins of human life. But juxtaposed against that are a number of big science fiction conceits, and I'm not talking about transforming jet fighters. When the SDF-1 teleports and takes Macross Island with it, they end up on the far side of Pluto, and the surviving buildings and vehicles are all brought on board the SDF-1. But how exactly? How were buildings and city streets brought into the SDF-1 completely intact and so rapidly? How can the buildings and people survive inside the SDF-1 every time it causes chaos by transforming? How do they stay provisioned with food and clothing? How do businesses and manufacturers remain operating? Were entire factories teleported to Pluto as well? Apparently. They're even building new cars and advertising them in this little city within the spaceship.
Look at that! There's a sky out there!
You didn't know about it? Robotech Research made it. I really think it's great the way they made it look so real.
It's also a bit of a leap to rationalize the Zentradi's full-force mentality to annihilate the planet Earth when all they want is the SDF-1. Further a leap is the fact that they haven't succeeded sooner. Either the SDF-1 is just that powerful, or all 1 million Zentradi starships are extremely inept. I found myself saying more than a few times, how are they not dead yet? We're forced to assume they even the odds through innovative combat tactics, their favorite being reinforcing the bow of the Macross with shields and fisting Zentradi ships to death. Robotech gets away with it by choosing to be an epic space fantasy rather than science fiction, despite a conspicuous amount of science in the plot. It's a series where style and substance are mostly balanced, but not always. Hey Roy, your hair is in your face. Your anime hair being in your face in a fighter plane isn't a good idea. Depth perception is really important for a military jet pilot. One of my favorite examples of logic breaking in the series is when Rick, Max, and Ben have to fight Breetai in their mecha to save Lisa. They manage to rip a hole in the ship and fling Breetai out into space. Immediately after that, they start trying to laser their way through the sealed airlock doors to escape. Why? You guys just blasted a great big hole right over your heads. Why aren't you getting away through that? And I'd be remiss not to mention the pointless narration.
Below deck, Claudia Grant checks in with her fiancé Roy Fokker. The months of emergency duty following the activation of the Space Fortress have been hard on their relationship.
Explaining the story with a voiceover in film and television isn't necessary 90% of the time, and plain awful 95% of the time. The guy they got to do the voice is a great actor. Don't get me wrong, but the writing he's delivering is superfluous.
Michael struggled with the rewrite of the Thundercats script. He felt the pressure of gaining new subscribers, but he also wanted to stay true to his opinions about the series. Thoughts of headaches, fighting angry YouTube commenters, and battling copyright claims weighed on his mind.
Where the original Source series, Super Dimension Fortress Macross, weakens is that it doesn't know when to end. The series crescendos with a massive final battle over Earth as the SDF-1 and a number of Zentradi defectors face the might of the Zentradi Armada, with Minmay singing her heart out to psychologically rattle the Zentradi forces. Rick Hunter, originally named Hikaru Ichiro, races down to Earth to rescue Lisa Hayes, originally Misa Hayase, from an underground base before it is destroyed. It's an amazing aha moment. Literally. This would have been an appropriate ending to the series. Hikaru and Misa are now an item. He declares earlier that he was finally able to move on from Minmay, and the Earth is saved from the Zentradi, although at great cost. But it didn't end there. The show was so successful that they decided in the middle of its run to extend the number of episodes. Macross's narrative was a victim of its own success. The final episodes chronicle the Zentradi's defectors having problems adjusting to life with humans. Rick has a falling out with Lisa and returns to being conflicted about Minmay, and another battle with the Zentradi ensues, causing even more destruction. We get to be witnesses to the deterioration of Minmay's messed up relationship with her abusive alcoholic cousin. It feels rather repetitive and anticlimactic. Overall, though, Robotech's Macross Saga is not only the strongest Robotech series, but arguably the strongest cartoon of the 1980s, with mature screenwriting, intelligent plot devices, grandiose scope, and multi-dimensional characters. Only the prolonged denouement and occasionally Lin Minmay detracts from the series in any way. When it comes to those final stories, this is where the Robotech adaptation justifies a use for those tail-end episodes over the Japanese version. Because Harmony Gold was creating a saga, they would use this extended epilogue as the staging ground to weave in the next chapter of the Robotech saga. Whether or not they succeeded is wholly dependent on how you feel about Robotech, the Masters.